Let's go back to our file storage class. And here we have this, let's put a mark here, call these images, because we are going to put the functions here for image, for video, for audio, etc. So we have some place to separate them. So what I want to do now is first to write some functions that are going to help us to save our files locally on a disk. And this I'm going to do outside of my class. And I'm going to put a mark here, helpers. And here we are going to have three functions. The two of them are going to return where our file directory is, because in order to save something in a local directory, we need to get that local directory, which is reserved for our application as like a sandbox. And the third function is going to check if the file exists there before we download. So the idea is every time the user wants to get an image, avatar image, we are going to come and check if the image is in the local directory. We will return that image. Otherwise, we are going to get one from our Firebase. So let's write a function. And this is get documents URL. And this is gonna return a URL. So what we want to get here is our document directory of our application. So I'm going to say return, and we access our file manager dot default manager dot URLs for in, and for we want our document directory. Just say dot document directory, and in we want dot user domain mask. And I want to get the last link. So because this is returns an array of links, and we want to get the last, and I'm going to unwrap this. So this is going to return our document URL where we have access locally, where we can save it. Then I want to write another function, call this file in documents directory. And we're going to pass a file name string, and this is going to return a string to us. So the idea of this is we want to get a path for our local file, and we are going to give the file name that we want to save, and then it will add this to our document directory, and it will return to us the final path. This is like the file directory we are using for our Firebase, is storage reference. This is the same thing we are doing for the local. So I'm going to say return, and we are going to access our function get document URL, and then I want to appending path component, and we are going to append our string here, which is our file name, and then we just get the path to this. So we just append whatever the file name to our main path and return that. And the last helper function we need to do is func file exists at path, and then we are passing a path, which is a string. And this will return Boolean, so it's either true or false. So we have a file in that directory or no. So here we are going to by default say var does exist equals to false. So by default we are going to assume that this file doesn't exist, and I'm going to return that, so we get rid of our error. And now we want to check if the file exists or not. So we are going to access the file path. So we say let file path is equals, and then we get access our file in document directory and the file name, which is our path. Once we get the path to our document, we want to check if anything there exists. So I'm going to access file manager here, which is equals to our file manager.default. And then we will ask our file manager if it has something for the specific path. So I will say does exist equals to file manager dot file exist at path, and we will pass our file path. Or we could actually get rid of this and let's just return this part here and make our code a little bit shorter. Don't have to set extra variables. So this function will take a path to our file and it will tell us if there is a file with that name or no. If you want to make this even shorter, we can do it this way. So we get this instead of our file manager, and a file exists at path, and we just pass this. Now this is like a one-liner now. Right? It's harder for reading if you want to read that, but it's shorter in a code. So now you have both ways. You can choose whichever you want to use. And we can write the function to save a file locally. So this one I'm now doing inside my class just after my upload image function. I'm going to put a mark here, call this save locally. And we say class func save file locally. And then we pass our file data that we want to save, which is NS data instead of just the data. And then we say file name, we want to save it for a string. So this function is going to take an NS data, which is an Objective-C version of data. And we are using an NS data here because it's easier to save it locally. And then we want also to give it a file name, under what name we want to save it, because we want to retrieve this file later, and this is how we're going to find it with its name. So I'm going to access my documents directory. So I will say get documents URL, and then I want to append appending path component with our file name, and we will tell that is it directory, is it a folder. I'm going to say false because it's just a file. And once we have this, we can get our file here. And actually I need to set here let doc URL is equals to this, and then I will say file data dot write to, and then we want to use the atomically. So we want to write to this file data to, and we want to write this to our doc URL. Atomically I'm going to set true, and atomically means that whenever there is a file in our directory and we are going to override it, it's going to create a temp file, and once the override finishes successfully, only after it's going to delete the original file. Otherwise it's not going to delete if the writing was unsuccessful, so we don't lose the original file, it will be corrupt. So this will create just a temp file, write, and if everything was successfully, it's just going to replace the old file. So this way we can now save our file locally. So let's get back to our edit profile, which is somewhere here. And this to do here, I'm going to replace with file storage dot save file locally. And file data, here we want to convert our image into a JPEG because this is what we want to save. And I will say image dot JPEG data. And then we have compression quality. I'm going to save it 100% locally because we don't have to bother with the file size. It's just an image of our avatar. So I want to keep it a high quality in our database. You want to change the compression here to not make very big files for your application. You can do that. I'm going to keep it to 100%. Let's set that this is an NS data, because this is what the file is expecting. And the file name, remember, we are calling it with our user ID. So I'm going to pass it here as a file name. Let's get rid of this to thing. And now we are ready to go. This function will take and save a file locally, but we won't understand if we have a file locally until our next lecture, where we are going to write our download image from Firebase function.